They arrived in my messages in the dead of night. 8 different people, 8 threads, all swearing the same thing. Ordinary places slipped into something else when nobody was watching. These are the ones that kept me awake for hours, reported on Reddit, told to me as first-hand accounts or things I was asked to help make sense of. I'm not saying any of them are proof. I'm saying these were real moments for real people, and they all ended with a single cold thing in common. Questions that never got answered. My aunt's Victorian looked like a postcard from the road. High ceilings, carved wood, flowered wallpaper that smelled faintly of dust and lemon. I was house-sitting, the kind of gig you take for a free place to sleep and a little cash. She warned me off the basement. "Stay upstairs," she said. "Don't open that door." It felt like part of the story of the house. You know the type. Rooms that hold their breath. The first night there were whispers. Not the house settling. Low, thread-like murmurs from below, like someone rehearsing a conversation they never finished. I told myself it was pipes. Then I found small things on the stairs in the morning. Loose coins, a child's button, nothing that belonged to me. On the third night, the murmuring turned to names. I could make out syllables at 2:13 a.m., soft and patient. I went down once with a flashlight and the beam fell on an old wooden box in the corner of the basement workbench. It was full of black and white photos. Faces scratched away with a blunt instrument. Every face erased except the eyes. The eyes stared out from torn emulsion. I remember the smell. Old paper and metal polish and something under it that made my throat close. When I lifted the box, the basement door slammed. It wasn't the wind. It was the kind of hard, final thud that meant a solid thing had moved into place. I ran upstairs. I left the box on the kitchen table and slept in the car that night. In the morning, my aunt found it and was furious. Not that I'd brought it upstairs, but that someone had scratched those faces. She took the box and locked it in a closet. She told me not to tell anyone. I told myself I'd never go back in that basement. But sometimes I wake thinking of those scratched eyes, and I can still feel the pressure of the door closing behind me. I was driving a rig through the plains on a January night. The clock on the dash read 3 a.m. There's a particular kind of emptiness out there. The radio is static, and the highway eats your breathing. I saw headlights wobble on the shoulder ahead. A small car swerving like a drunk having a nightmare. I eased past, hands white on the wheel, and a mile later I saw the same car overturned in a shallow ditch. Troopers already had cones out. No one inside. No skid marks that matched where it had been. When I walked back to the cab to call it in, another driver nodded and said, "You seen it?" He'd seen the wobbling car, too. Later, when troopers took my statement, they asked if I'd seen a passenger. I said no. They had a weird look and told me multiple drivers on that stretch were calling about the same car, same make, same license plate that didn't match registry. "No official accidents on record for this model tonight," one said. He sounded tired, like he'd been told to expect the unexpected. I quit taking that route for a while. I still remember the way the hazard lights blinked on the flipped car, a helpless strobe in the dark. There was no one to speak for the driver. There was nothing to explain how a car could be seen swerving and then be found empty, as if the person who'd been steering had simply stepped out of the world and left the machine behind. My first week in the new apartment was standard nervousness and boxes. The bathroom mirror was long and thin, the kind that makes you check a tie and then forget you checked it. At first, I thought the light was bad. The reflection lagged fractionally behind me, like a brief stutter when I turned my head. I laughed at it. It felt like a trick of a cheap fixture. Then the lag became a copy that didn't quite have my timing. I'd smile, and my reflection would hold its grin for a beat too long. Once, while brushing my teeth, I caught it tilt its head when I hadn't. The air in the bathroom grew colder without warning. I stopped using the mirror at night. One morning I woke to find the glass fogged, even though no one had showered. Words were traced in the condensation. Let me in. The letters were childlike and shaky, as if whoever wrote them had been fighting to use their hand. I couldn't say when they appeared. There was no moisture elsewhere. I taped brown paper over the mirror and slept with the bathroom light on. I moved out 2 weeks later. I told myself I'd left because the place was too small, that I was being silly. But I still wake sometimes, and imagine the mirror fogging over on its own. I wonder what would happen if I peeled back that paper and stared into the delay again. I don't want to know, and that feeling is heavy enough to make me pack a bag for the 3rd time that month. Across the courtyard from my 2nd floor window was a unit that had been empty for as long as anyone I knew could remember. No landlord signs, no one collecting rent, so it stayed dark most nights. I used to leave my blinds open because I liked the sense of the courtyard being alive. Then I started seeing it. A silhouette would stand perfectly still in the center of that dark window for hours. It never moved, never shifted posture. It simply faced me. I watched it like you watch a burn in a fireplace, fascinated and afraid. At first, I assumed a neighbor with insomnia. Then the figure showed up at different times during the day, always the same outline. Shoulders square, head tilted the faintest degree toward mine. The worst part was how it watched without blinking. It felt like being studied. I called the landlord, who promised he'd send someone to check. He did. They opened the door and found the apartment empty. Dust on the floor, no furniture at all, no curtains, no prints, nothing to cast that definite of a human shape. We all laughed nervously and told each other we were tired, that city living does strange things. A week later, I came home and found the silhouette in my own window. It had been on the other side of the courtyard, and now it was closer, pressed flat against my glass, as if seeing me for the first time. I pulled the curtains and slept standing up. The figure never made a sound. It just watched. In the rooms where the city should have felt public, something had crossed the distance and learned how to look in. I do a lot of solo hikes. There's a trail outside town that people go to when they want to get lost for a few hours and come back smelling of pine. One afternoon I took that trail alone, not thinking about anything except the tape of my playlist. The woods were hollow with heat. Birds were scarce. At first it was just a sound, a breath of syllables that seemed to ride the leaves when I walked. It followed the rhythm of my steps. When I stopped, the whispering stopped. When I started again, it resumed a step behind me. It was a voice, or voices, too soft to make out words but purposeful in how they matched me. I pulled out my phone and recorded for a few minutes, more to prove I'd heard something than with hope I'd catch anything useful. On the walk back, I played it. The recording is full of wind and the rustle of my own footsteps. Under it, there's a voice, quiet, precise, that breathes close. Come. The way it lines up in the track makes my palms sweat. On playback, the source sounded like it came from directly behind me, not scattered in the trees. I stopped going back to that trail. I don't know who, if anyone, used to be there. I don't know if I stepped into someone else's habit, but I know the sensation of being matched step for step by a sound that stops when you do. That knowledge stays with you, a small alarm that never really resets. We rented the ground floor of a college house as a stopgap. One room in that house had been locked forever. The landlord said, laughing too hard, that it was a remnant from the previous owner. He warned us not to go in. It became a dare the way locked doors do in shared houses. A month after moving in, we came home drunk and broke it open. It smelled like closed things, paper, old varnish, and something like iron. The room was empty, save for a single wooden chair in the exact center. The chair had deep gouges down one side like claws. The walls were scratched in a pattern we couldn't match to any tool we owned. It looked like someone had been arguing with the wood for a long time. That night we all had the same dream. We were in the house. We knew we weren't allowed in that room, but there we were, and in the dream, the chair would be occupied. A hollow-eyed figure sat in it, thin and wrong in scale, watching us. We woke up clammy and angry at ourselves for letting the place in our heads. One by one we packed and moved out within a week. The chair stayed. The landlord told us he had no idea what had been in the room before. He refused to remove the chair. I still pass by that house sometimes, and I imagine the chair waiting in the center of a locked space, patient and sharpened by time. I found the cemetery while looking for somewhere off the grid to shoot photos. It wasn't on any map. It was a clearing you could miss if you weren't paying attention. Most of the headstones were lichen and ruin. Then, I found a fresh patch of disturbed earth, with no marker at all. It looked wrong among the weathered stones. Near it, I dug up a small wooden box, buried a little shallow. Inside were brittle letters tied with a ribbon. The names on the envelopes didn't line up with the cemetery records I could find later. The letters were full of promises, written in a hand that seemed urgent and young. One was addressed to a woman who, according to local records, had died decades before the writer was born. The math made no sense. That night I dreamed of a woman in a tattered dress, standing at the edge of my bed, clutching the letters to her chest. She didn't speak. She held them and looked at me like she'd been waiting years for someone to take them seriously. I went back to the clearing at dawn to show someone. The fresh earth had smoothed over. The little grave was gone, as if it had never been there. I kept the letters. I still reread them sometimes, and each time I feel like I'm holding something that's not fully mine. The grave never reappeared. The people I asked said the plot had been empty for decades. Whether someone buried it that morning, or I had unearthed a memory, I can't say. The letters insist on a love story that doesn't fit the calendar of anyone alive to explain it. I worked the night desk at a hotel for a summer. It's a job that's heavy on small hours and heavier on oddness. The building had a room that held a reputation. Room 308. It had been vacant for months after a previous tenant left suddenly. We kept the room locked and off the register. At 2 a.m., the front desk phone rang. The caller ID read 308. The line was silence when I picked up, a dead air that warmed my ears with static. I took the call and went up to check the room myself. The air in the corridor was colder than the lobby. The door opened to an untouched space. The bed was made, the curtains drawn. The phone in the room was off the hook, lying on the nightstand as if someone had just set it down and left. When I closed the door and came back downstairs, the phone on the front desk rang. The ID read, internal. It was room 308, calling the desk. I let it ring, and then picked up. There was nothing. Just the void sound of a line that existed to connect two people, but connected only absence. I quit the night shift a month later. I told myself it was stress, the kind of thing people in hospitality joke about when they have to work odd hours. But there are times I wake with the phantom jolt of a phone that's been picked up an inch too late. And I remember the cold in that corridor, and the phone off the hook, the way something in that room had insisted on making contact without ever showing a face. These are not tidy stories. They do not resolve into facts you can lay out on a table. They are moments people lived and reported, a box with faces scratched away, a car that shouldn't have been empty, a mirror that doesn't mirror. Ordinary rooms and ordinary roads that kept their secrets and then refused to explain. If any of these got under your skin, or if you've been followed by a whisper, a silhouette, or a ring from an empty room, put it in the comments. I read them. We might feature one in the next video. When you add them together, a pattern emerges. It's not a cause or a proof. It's simple. Places you think are safe can change when you're not looking. A chair by itself becomes an accusation. A window becomes a face. A phone becomes a mouth. Most of these stories end with a person leaving or covering something or deciding never to go back. The endings are small acts of retreat. I keep thinking about the scratched photographs and the eyes left intact. There's a dignity in the focus, Whatever someone tried to remove, they couldn't erase the gaze. That's what makes these accounts linger. They offer you a pair of eyes that won't stop asking the same quiet question. Who's watching when you think you're alone? If these stories kept you up, if they made the dark in your living room a little louder, like the video and subscribe button, and send your own nights that won't end to the link in the description. I'll read them. I'll pass along the ones that unsettle me the most. And maybe, if you're already lying awake, don't look at the windows. Don't check the hallway. Let whatever is out there be. Sometimes the only thing we can do is stop inviting it in.